Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cooking by the Book, episode 3. This time with Petite Patisserie, as we've got Stephanie Massouda here with the Unofficial Harry Potter Cookbook, making a delicious treat here for us today. We are so excited to have this program back here once again with the Kokomo-Howard County Public Library. Stephanie, take it away. What are we making here today?
Absolutely. So this is a classic from the book. It's called a treacle tart. Now, if you're not aware of what a treacle tart is, it was originally kind of like a peasant food. So it uses old stale bread. It uses whatever kind of sweetener you have lying around, some flour, and you make a crust. You put the breadcrumbs and your sugar and some lemon into it, and you have a pie. So we are going to just jump right in. So I have actually already made the breadcrumbs. I made those earlier, but I will show you how. So the nice thing about this too is if you ignore all my mise en place, which is all of my little containers of things, it's really kind of a one-hit wonder. So you really only need a food processor, a single bowl, and a pan. So you're gonna break your bread up. So any kind of bread works. It doesn't actually have to be like an older kind of bread.
Now, why exactly does it need to be stale as opposed to fresh bread?
Yeah, so the stale bread actually soaks up the liquids better. So it'll soak up all of your sweetener of choice. It'll soak up that lemon juice, and it'll just give you a really nice flavor. All right, so you're gonna blitz that until it looks about like this. So kind of just like fine breadcrumbs. You're gonna have some bigger ones mixed in. Like I said, I've already measured mine out, so you dump those. So for this, the recipe actually calls for golden syrup. So golden syrup is a UK exclusive item. They don't really sell that in the US. Luckily for us, there's a lot of substitutes. I like to use agave syrup. That's my number one go-to as a straight substitute. If it's like Christmas, fall, like winter time, I'll use maple syrup. That's another good substitute. And then you can add some spices to it instead of the lemon and get kind of a different feel. So it's something that you can kind of customize to suit whatever your needs are. And then you just zest one lemon, making sure you don't get too much of that pith in there. So the pith is the actual white part that's underneath the skin of the lemon, and that's what holds all the bitterness. So you really try and just do little short strokes while rocking the lemon so that you don't get tons of that pith in there. But you want to do the entire lemon.
You did that incredibly. I feel like that would have taken me all day.
Tons of practice. And then you're going to soften it on your counter. So this is a nice technique to get the juices that are inside a little bit more accessible if you don't have like a hand squeezer or any kind of juicer. Just roll it on your counter a little bit. And then what I like to do is straight back into here where you just did your zest, and that'll catch all of your lemon seeds and all that stuff that you actually don't want in there.
Oh, that is incredible.
Tricks of the trade. So get all that nice stuff out. All right. And that is it for your filling. So you stir your filling together. So the recipe book actually says to make it immediately before you fill your pie crust. I like to make it first. That gives your flavors time to kind of meld together. So your pie crust itself has to sit for about 2 to 3 hours at least in the fridge to kind of get hard, to set up a little bit. So that just allows all of those flavors to come together. And now, as long as you don't have any dry breadcrumbs left, that part is done. We'll hold off on that. Next thing is this. So I measured out all of my crust ingredients. So This is called mise en place. We were actually talking about this a little bit ago. So it means that everything has its place, and it's just a really good technique when you start getting into a lot more advanced pastry. Some things happen very quickly and you need all of your ingredients where you know where they are, they're already portioned out. It also makes sure that you've read through your recipe. So I'll line everything up in the order that I'm going to use it in. And that just shows that you've read the recipe, you understand it, you have your things measured out, you know what order it goes in. And there's not going to be a surprise 4 steps in where you need to run to the store to get something, or you suddenly realize that you don't have the right equipment out or something like that. So this is my 2.5 cups of flour. This is my powdered sugar and my salt. So I put both of those together. The nice thing about mise en place is you don't actually have to dirty up so many dishes. If you have a step like that where everything's going to go in together, you can already pre-mix it and just hold it in a bowl on the side, and you don't have to worry about it. All right, so we're going to blitz that just to get everything mixed together. So the reason that you're going to blitz this together now, your powdered sugar probably has lumps in it. It's not your fault. It happens, especially here in Indiana in the middle of summer with this high humidity. So by blitzing it with the flour, you get flour between all of the powdered sugar particles. And that means that you're not going to end up with clumps in your final pastry dough. So it just takes a couple seconds. You just want to get it nice and homogeneous. So as long as there's no big patches of either of your things, you're good to go. And then from there, you're going to blitz in your butter. So this one's nice because you don't have to use the rocker or the forks to mix your butter into your dough. You always want cold butter for pie crust. The cold butter keeps its shape better, and that way when you're mixing it together, those fat particles get in between your flour particles, and that's what creates like a really flaky, tender pie crust. If you want it to be even more tender, you can add maybe like a tablespoon to 2, depending on how much your recipe is making, of vodka or another flavorless spirit, because it evaporates so quickly in the oven that it flakes up your pastry. So your butter probably already comes in sticks, but mine does not. So I had to just cut it into the 2 sticks required in the recipe. And I like to do it maybe a third at a time. And that way you don't end up with a whole bunch of butter trying to blend in at once. So I'm going to go ahead and blitz this for a minute. One of the crucial parts of making a pie crust is that you don't want to overwork your dough. So working your dough is what develops gluten bonds. That's why you have to knead breads. You're trying to get those gluten bonds to form between your flour. In a pie crust, you don't want that. That's what gives you chewiness, and you don't want a chewy pie crust. So you really want to work it as absolutely little as possible. Which is another reason why I do it in batches, because if you try and throw in 2 cubed up sticks of butter at once, or if you throw in 2 whole sticks of butter, it's just going to have to whir for a very long time to get you there. So one more. And you just want to check on it. So it should have kind of a coarse, everybody says it looks like cornmeal. So it's just a little bit thicker than it was a minute ago. Those butter, you can feel all the little pieces of that cold butter inside. You're going to pop that out. And then for this recipe, we mix it with 2 eggs, 1/3 cup of cream, and a splash of vanilla. So the cream is actually gonna give a little bit more tenderness to the dough. If you want like a truly flaky pie crust, you would just use water. Water will get you the absolute flakiest pie crust you can have. But if you want it to be just a little bit more kind of like shortbread, you're gonna wanna use cream. And then this is the part where the kids like to get involved because you are going to make a mess. Because you've got to just mix that together as quickly as you can. So it's kind of like squeezing Play-Doh. Just run through it. All right, and your hands are going to be covered. So I've got a couple of techniques for getting all of this gunk off of your hands. So once you've gotten it to the point where there's no more raw flour, you're gonna scrape your hands off as best as you can. Ooh, you lost a piece. And here's what you're gonna do. So I usually do this over a different bowl or over a trash can. So the point of this is all of this is very buttery now. It's very greasy. And that grease is really bad for your pipes. It's really bad for the wastewater treatment plant. It's pretty much bad for everything. So you try and get as little of that down the drain as possible. So to do that, you're going to get some flour. This is another part that kids enjoy. I'm gonna do this off to the side over here, but you're gonna get flour on your hands and you're just gonna rub that together. And what that does is it takes a lot of that grease and the new flour soaks that up and it gets it off of your hands way easier, way faster, and way cleaner than just washing them would. So do that a couple of times, making sure you get between your fingers, kind of behind. And then all you have to do is dust off your hands and then it's way, way easier to rinse them. My hands are pretty much clean at that point. So that's a nice trick that I like for messing with pie crust. So at this point, you're gonna divide your dough, which should be pretty soft and sticky, into 2 big balls, and then you're gonna pop it in the fridge. Luckily for me, I'm magic, so I have 2 that already got cold. And we're gonna roll them out. All right, so this would be, this has been setting up in the fridge for about 4 hours now, so a little bit longer than it needed to. You're gonna make sure you flour your surface.
Just in case.
Thank you. All right, so I have a nice little stencil here. It shows you what you need for an 8-inch, 9-inch, 10-inch, and 11-inch pie crust. So you always want to go about an inch over whatever size pan you have. My pan is actually a 7-inch tart pan. Ooh. So we're going to go for somewhere between 8 and 9 inches. It also depends on how deep your pan is. So if you have a really deep pie pan, so apple pie is one that you'll have, it's a couple inches deep. You're gonna wanna make it a little bit bigger. Let's see here. This dough is pretty finicky, so she likes to fall apart. You actually don't need to get it perfectly round. We're going to cut off any of the excess.
From the mirror.
Yeah, that's
Can you still see okay?
Yeah, I can see fine.
that's perfect.
Is that good?
Yeah.
All right, so this is a tart pan. A tart pan, unlike your other pans, is going to be two distinct pieces. This is done so that when your tart is done, you can get it out easily. You just pop up on the bottom. What that means though is you have to be careful once you put your crust in that you don't grab it by the bottom and just mess up all that work you just did. So you're going to fold in half and fold in half again and set that point as close as you can to the absolute center of your tart dish. Unfold it. And then with one of these scraps that you inevitably have, you're going to make a little ball. And this ball is going to help you press your dough into those fluted edges. So the fluted edges are those little ridges. And if you try and do it by hand, a lot of times it'll end up just breaking the dough. But by using a piece of dough to push it in, you're able to get it as close as possible to the sides without actually ripping it.
So should you do that with just a regular pie as well?
Mhm.
Is that a trick? That's
Yeah, so it's applicable for those as well if you want to get it all the way up to the edge. And then all you do is cut all the way around. So I like to do a rough cut at first, just to kind of get a lot of these bigger pieces to come off. And then I'll go back and I'll fine tune my cuts after I've patched any holes. So I do actually have a small hole in the side. So you take just a little bit of your crust and you get it really warmed up in your hands. You get it nice and thin and you just patch over. So this one actually happens to be on the side. So we're going to do the same thing with our ball of dough and push it together. And then we're going to cut. So you're going to cut at an angle towards the outside, and that's what's going to leave you with those ridges around the edge. And now you have your crust, and we need to make the lattice top. So a lattice top is just kind of like a weaved top on top of your pie. It's that classic pie look. This one you can actually leave as is. You can bake it just like that. You can do your lattice top. You can do a different type of crumb topper. It's up to you. I like to usually leave it blank. I don't think a lattice is worth all the effort that you have to go through to get it. But you're going to want to try and make it long strips. So I go as long as my rolling pin, and then I go backwards the other way and finish it off. Now you can use a knife. I like to use either a pizza or a pastry cutter. This one's actually a dual, so you can do a straight or a separate fluted edge. I'm just going to do straight. So you're going to want about 3/4 of an inch strips. It's okay if they're not perfect. They don't all have to be the same size. They don't all have to be perfectly straight. You just get as many of them as you can. And then you put your filling right in. So this pie crust actually does not need blind baking. So blind baking is when you make your crust and then you pop it in the oven for 10-15 minutes without a filling. And that's usually used for fruit pies or pies that have like a lot of liquid, or a pie where you add like a cold custard or cream afterwards. It's just to make sure that the bottom of your pie crust or your tart doesn't get soggy. In this case, this is just sugar, so there's no moisture in this other than lemon juice. So you're not gonna have that problem, so you don't have to go through that extra step. So flatten that down and start laying your strips. I always start in the middle and work my way outwards. You can do as close or as far apart as you want to. Just make sure you leave enough overhang. And that way, if you have to come back in a little while and sort of move them around a little bit, you can. So here comes the fun part of the lattice. You're going to do every other one. And you're going to lay a strip. Now, if your dough is being really finicky and it kind of is prone to breaking on you, this is more of a malleable dough, so I'm not having that problem. But sometimes your dough will be a little bit tougher, and when you fold it like that, it tries to crack. In that case, I recommend just lifting up the one you're doing at a time. So for this case, I would lay this down and then lift it like this, and that way you're not leaving it folded. And you just keep alternating. We've just got one more. And then you're going to do the same thing. You're going to trim around the edges again. So just cut it. And at this point, you're going to want to crimp the edges down. So you're going to want your lattice to stick to the rest of your crust. So as soon as you get all these little bits cut off, we're just going to go around and sort of pinch it to the edge. Now, before you start putting your pie crust into your tin or doing any of this, you should preheat your oven to 400. And that way, by the time you're done with all of this, your oven's also warm. So then this step's optional. It's an egg wash. So you're just going to put the egg all over any exposed parts of this crust. And that's just going to let it kind of brown up a little bit better. It gives it kind of a glossy sheen. And then when you pop that in the oven, you end up with this. And to get this out of your pan, you just take any kind of thing that's smaller than your pie crust tin, set it on, and there you are. And that is a treacle tart. Are there any questions maybe while I wash my hands?
Wow, that was absolutely incredible. My goodness, so many incredible tricks on there. So now you were mentioning that the what did you call it? The checkered tops of the.
Oh, the lattice.
The lattice. So you were saying that that's not necessarily worth the effort.
Right.
If you do put in the effort, what is the difference? I mean, is it just like a little bit of a different flavor profile?
It's actually no different flavor. It's just presentation. Okay. It's all about how it looks.
Really pretty.
Yeah, and the same thing if you use kind of the fluted end of this guy where it's wavy, and then you cut your line out of that, it'll create these really cool edges, kind of like if you had those scissors in elementary school that had like the cool cuts. So that's another way to get a really easy like step up on presentation. Yeah.
Wow. So you mentioned that your crust had been in the fridge for 4 hours?
Yes.
What, you said that was actually a little longer than usual?
Yes.
What time amount would it actually be?
Yeah, the recipe says 2 to 3 hours. Honestly, anything past when the butter sets is kind of pointless. The whole point of putting your crust back in the fridge is to let, after you've put it through the food processor and then worked your hands into it, it's a little bit warmer. Your butter starts to melt. So you pop it in the fridge to let that butter harden back up again. That makes it easier to roll out, and it also makes it in the oven behave better. It doesn't change its shape. It doesn't contract as much. So you just, anything past that harden point is kind of pointless, but a lot of recipes overestimate the time just in case your fridge is a little bit warmer or your butter was a little bit warmer or something like that.
Okay. Feel free to put some questions in the comments if you have any questions for Stephanie. See if we can get to those for you. Now, Stephanie, the way that you talk about this recipe, you make it seem as though you've made this a lot. And I do wonder, have you used this Unofficial Harry Potter Cookbook a lot, and are there other recipes inside that book that you would recommend?
I have, so actually this is my copy and I got it right after it came out and you can see all
yeah,
my pages are like dog-eared and I've got a bunch of stuff in here. So yes, I have made quite a few things from here. I actually had a Harry Potter Halloween party a couple years ago, and it was exclusively recipes from this book. There are quite a lot of good ones in here. They're not all sweet. There's actually, it's predominantly savory, but they just take you through, I mean, pretty much if it's in the book, if it's in the movie, it's in this book. And they just kind of take you through between book to book to book. A lot of the ones that obviously I have fun with are things like the bath buns, which are just like a really simple dinner roll. I've done the creamy onion soup, which is kind of like a dairy version of a French onion soup. Yeah, there's definitely some good ones in there.
Yeah, for sure. That's really awesome. Now, are there other like fun cookbooks like the Harry Potter cookbook that you use regularly? I say fun, I mean, not that all cookbooks aren't fun.
I was about to say, I love cooking.
No, I mean, like, for example, at home we have the Bob's Burgers
Right.
burger book. I didn't know if there was any other fun books that were based off of popular franchises.
I'm not sure if there's any like this one. I know Binging with Babish has a series, and I believe he's come out with a cookbook. So he does recipes based off of film, television, video games, things like that. So he'll recreate some crazy stuff, and then kind of show you how to make it practical. I've used his cookbook a couple of times. I have, it's called Brave Tart, and it's by Stella, and I can't remember her last name. It takes you through kind of like the history of Americana, and teaches you how to make a lot of things from really classic recipes like Boston cream pie, to crazy things like make your own ho-hos and Twinkies. And then she even goes way off the deep end and makes her own sprinkles. So, I mean, there's really anything you want in that book too. Those are probably three of my favorite ones that are in this kind of genre.
Now, shifting gears back home, back to Petite Patisserie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about your restaurant. For anybody that may be unfamiliar with it, tell us about Petite Patisserie.
Yeah, so Petite is a local bakery and bistro. We make everything in-house down to our coffee syrups. So everything is made fresh. We make all of our pastries and everything fresh daily. Our bakers get in at midnight. They're working all through the night to make sure that everything that goes out in the morning is as fresh as possible. We just started doing breads actually, so we now have a full line of breads like focaccia, ciabatta, baguettes, sourdough, French bread, things like that, in addition to our white and our 9-grain, which were our kind of staples. And then our pastry selection changes daily, so that's always fun. You never know what you're going to see when you walk in.
Yeah, that is always a lot of fun. Now, what are some of your top hit items? I know that you said you change recipes or you have all kinds of different stuff, but are there things that you always keep on stock because of they're just so popular?
Yeah, so some of the ones that we keep pretty much all the time. So we're actually cutting our croissant products down to Friday, Saturday now, which means that throughout the week we'll have more of kind of like the classic favorites. So that's things like our oat bars. Those are a holdover from when I sold at the farmer's market under Scrumptious. Those were really popular. Cream puffs are really popular. On the weekends, definitely chocolate croissants are the big one. And then we have our loaded croissants, which are pretty ginormous. They're about this big, and they're filled with a cheesecake filling and then a 4-berry compote. And those ones are really popular. So we definitely have the ones that we keep all the time, and then it's kind of the little fun things that we trade in or the flavors change or something like that.
Now, where are you located? Give us your hours, kind of the
Yeah. So we are on North Main Street, right across from the courthouse. We're 108 North Main, next to Mojo's. Our hours, we're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. We're open 8 to 2 Wednesday and Thursday, 8 to 4 on Friday, 10 to 4 on Saturday, and 10 to 3 on Sunday. So a little bit of odd hours. They're on our Facebook page. They're on our website. Our entire menu is on our website. So we actually do a lot more than just pastries. We have sandwiches, a full espresso line, salads, soups, things like that. So you can find that entire menu on our website.
We do have another requested question on here. Do you guys take special orders for things?
We do. We take special orders a lot. We also do parties. For special orders, we require 72-hour notice, just to give our bakers a little bit of time to figure out what their game plan is going to be and how to work that into their daily schedule. But yeah, we do quite a lot of special orders and events. Yeah.
Do you guys have any questions for Stephanie?
I do.
Absolutely.
So like the dough that you use, is there like a basic dough for a majority of like your pastries, and then am I making sense with that?
Yes. Yeah, so croissant dough is one of the ones that we use a lot. So the croissant dough gets used in our danishes, our croissants, obviously, our chocolate croissants, our loaded croissants, our savory danishes, and we also make our cinnamon rolls out of our croissant dough, which makes them lighter and fluffier. We use puff pastry. So puff pastry we use when we do our cream corns, when we do Napoleons, things like that. So the difference between those two is that croissant dough is actually a leavened dough. It has yeast in it. Puff pastry does not, and it gets a lot flakier. So it wouldn't taste quite the same if you tried to make a croissant out of it. And then the other dough that we use quite frequently is our choux dough. So that's CHOUX. And that is a really interesting dough to make, but that's what makes our cream puffs and our eclairs. So those are like the three main doughs that we have. We also have our tart dough. So that's like we have two different types. We have a flour based and an almond based. But those are the major ones that we use.
So what is the dough that you have to fold the butter in? What is that, the choux dough?
So that is your croissant and your puff pastry dough. So that process is called lamination. And what you basically do is you take a dough, kind of like this one, lots of flour in it. You flatten it out and you put really cold butter in it, and then you just fold it up. And by continuing to fold that over and over again in certain ways, you end up with those layers that you see in your croissant, because the butter is acting like kind of like a shield between your two layers of dough. And then when you stack that over and over and over and over again, in a croissant, you typically have 216 layers. When it bakes up, it all separates apart, and that's what makes it flaky.
Wow.
So does the butter need to be in sheets over the dough then, or is
Yes.
that the best way to do it?
Yeah.
You pound it out and then roll it? How do you?
Yep.
How do you get
Yeah, so that actually has its own name, the process of taking your cold butter block and then pounding it out into a square, and then putting it into your dough. And then there's a couple of ways to do it. Some people do it like that. That's how we do it. We pound it out. You can actually buy just sheets of butter that are the right thickness, and just make it like that. And then the other way I've seen is to actually like take a block and to cut it into slices, and then to push that together and kind of rolling pin over it.
We have a question in the chat. How did you get started baking?
Yeah, so I started when I was really little. I started back in my parents' kitchen in North Carolina. I always kind of knew I wanted to own a bakery. So when I moved away after high school, I moved to Philadelphia, and I took a bunch of odd jobs trying to figure out how exactly it works in real life. So I took a lot of bakery jobs, ice cream shop jobs, cafes, things like that. I worked at donut shops. Basically, if it has to do with like food like this, I was doing it. So I worked through that for about 7 years, got my undergraduate degree, and then my husband moved out here, and that's how we ended up out here. But I've pretty much always been into baking. I'm entirely self-taught though. I didn't go to school for culinary. So everything I know is what either I've learned on the job or I've learned by poring over cookbooks. I have a really extensive cookbook collection. I really enjoy getting new cookbooks in, and then I read them cover to cover like a weirdo. And that's where I picked up a lot of my skills.
So Patisserie is a French pastry shop, am I correct?
Yes, so it is specifically a pastry shop. The French love their food. So they actually have 3 different words depending on what kind of shop it is. So if it's a viennoiserie, it is purely breakfast pastries.
Okay.
If it's a boulangerie, it is breads only. And if it's a patisserie, it's often those high-end desserts. And unlike our shop, which kind of mingles all of them together, they are very distinct shops in France, and you specialize in one, and that's all you do.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anything else?
Yeah, any other questions for Stephanie? All right, well, thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. If you have not been to Petite Patisserie, you gotta check them out. Check out their website. It's petitepat.com, right?
Yep.
I put a link to it in the chat.
Yes.
Perfect.
So make sure that you check that out. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
This was
you,
a wonderful
yeah.
round of applause.
Oh,
All right, so we do have another episode of Cooking by the Book that will be coming out once again next month. Do you want to preview that for us, Tricia? I believe it's called Nothing Fancy with Jessica Kingery.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
And it's from the book Nothing Fancy.
If I remember right, it was pasta with broccoli rabe and chorizo.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. No, yes. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for taking the time to be able to come out here and do
Absolutely.
this with us. This was absolutely wonderful. One more time, for anybody that would be interested in checking out Petite Patisserie, give us a rundown. How can we find you?
Yeah, so you can find us online. We have Facebook, we have Instagram. Our website is petitepat.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram under Petite Patisserie, and you can always stop by. We're just right there on the square.
Cool. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.